let's get right into it. Dynasty rookie draft based on Chad Reuter's most recent mock. Number one's pretty foolproof. Caleb Williams went number one to the Bears. You're going to take him number one in your Dynasty drafts. Leading up to this point, I kind of felt like Caleb was a little overhyped given the state of the Bears, but then they got Keenan, got Swift, and they'll likely add another piece either on the O-line or out wide with their second pick in the first round. But yeah, the first pick in your rookie draft is another easy decision this year. I am curious, though, if you traded out of the 101, comment what your haul was below, because I really can't see myself doing that in the one league I have the 101. Two pick, though, both in this draft and in Chad Reuter's mock. Jayden Daniels went number 2 to Washington. While I love Marvin, given the positional scarcity and Daniels' running capabilities, I favor him at the 2 spot, especially if he lands in Washington. No doubt in my mind that Kingsbury is going to utilize his rushing capabilities to the fullest extent, and Washington already has more offensive weapons than New England with McLaurin, Dotson, all that. So at the 3 spot, just mention him, Marvin Harrison. In this mock, he goes to the Chargers at pick 5. The consensus has Marvin going to 4 or 5, either Cardinals or Chargers. In this one, we do see him land in LA, which is suddenly very devoid of a lot of wide receiver talent. That said, I think Harbaugh is one of the coaches who could go anywhere in this draft. I think kind of the consensus that if he's there, I think Harbaugh could do anything in this draft. But if Marv does land with the Chargers, I wouldn't stress too much about a more run-focused offense. For one, Marvin is very talented. 2, we just said this wide receiver room isn't the league's most competitive, at least in terms of top-end talent. And 3, because of those 2 previous points, Marvin should get fed at a solid rate when the Chargers do throw the ball. The best example I can think of in recent memory would be A.J. Brown on the Titans, which is not to say that I think he's the wide receiver 12 overall as a rookie, just that it's possible to succeed in that type of run-first offense as a wide receiver, if you're talented enough. Then 4th, I'm going Drake Maye, who went to the Patriots at pick 3. I personally love Drake Maye, but the New England landing spot is an interesting one. How will this Patriots team change under Gerard Mayo? It's seemingly one of the worst spots of the top 3 to land at for fantasy purposes for these quarterbacks year one, but situation changes a lot more quickly than talent. And I think if you lean Maye, I really couldn't, I lean Maye, but I personally couldn't blame you for taking the next player at 4 if you're not a Maye fan, because newsflash, it's Nabers. He's very talented. Before I talk more about Nabers, I would like to take you on a quick little detour. One of the biggest surprises to me during the build-up to this draft was the crazy disparity between Nabers and Harrison on Underdog's pre-draft best ball ADP. Currently, Marv sits around 17, Nabers around 30. Now, Marv's 2 assumed landing spots put him with either Kyler or Herbert. That is noteworthy. However, Nabers could also go to LA if Marvin lands with Zona. But I think, people think that Nabers has a wider range of his landing spots. Talent-wise, I think they are closer to each other than that ADP suggests. On top of that, people tend to think they know a lot more about what's going to happen in the draft than they actually do. What we think is going to go, 1, 2, 3 easy in this draft is not going to happen. So, just a little side note, draft Nabers heavily in best ball right now. If you believe in the talent like me, do it heavily. Dynasty-wise, if Nabers does land in New York, Daniel Jones is a solid enough quarterback in the meantime. And if they do move on from him next year, Nabers' value will likely increase, at least in the short term, before that quarterback rolls out there. But I think just from a community sports in general, people are just going to assume that whatever quarterback the Giants roll out next year, if it isn't Danny Dimes, they'll probably assume he's going to be better, although I don't necessarily think that's a fair assumption. 6, though, J.J. McCarthy, who gets selected by the Denver Broncos at pick 4. So in this mock, Broncos trade with the Cardinals. They give up pick 12, a first and third rounder in 2025 for pick 4. So for JJ, this entire pre-draft process, I've been a McCarthy hater, but I'm also not a quarterback scout. If he goes top 5 or even top 10, he'll have a lot of job security during his rookie deal. Just look at Daniel Jones, who we just mentioned. Denver, though, lacks an elite weapon like the Vikings, who have been mocked to take JJ a lot. But this is still a quarterback being taken to pick 4. And quarterbacks are scarce. A lot more scarce than skill positions. That will follow for most of the rest of this video. So, I think you got to lean JJ. Even as someone that hates him, he can't go any further than this. He's like 6 at most, especially with that top, like, you just have to do it. Denver, not a great landing spot, but the job security at quarterback is so valuable. 7, though, a surprising trade, not a necessarily surprising pick, just surprising that it happened at pick 17. Kansas City Chiefs traded up for pick 17 to take Xavier Worthy. So very surprising move in this mock. Less so with the uncertainty surrounding Rashee Rice. He'll probably be fine. But Chiefs moving up to pick Worthy at 17 is crazy. I wish I was joking when I said if this actually were to happen, some people might draft Worthy as high as pick 4. I understand the drool foaming at all of our mouths at the idea of getting the next Tyreek Hill, but I think the smarter decision is to draft Maye, Nabers, and even JJ before him, even as a JJ hater. That said, with this landing spot, I do put Worthy above 2 players that were drafted before him in this mock. The first of those players being Rome, who lands with Arizona. In this mock, Arizona got their 12th pick in their trade with Denver, and then they traded up, took the 12, a 3rd, and a 5th for this 8th pick that they selected Rome at. Certainly, a great player, great landing spot. I'd personally favor Worthy in Kansas City just for that massive, insane ceiling. But for the argument for Rome, I've discussed his production profile in previous detail in another video. He's very good, possibly better than consensus gives him credit for. I think you could even argue for drafting Rome at 6 with these landing spots. If the draft goes like this, getting any of JJ, Worthy, or Rome at pick 8 is an absolute steal. Pick 9, though, another arguably the most surprising pick in Reuters mock, is a first-round running back. Dallas is certain to address running back in the draft, but it will surprise me if they do so in round 1 and take Jonathon Brooks at pick 24, which is what they do in this mock. Nonetheless, if they do, Brooks should shoot up draft boards. Not only is he a solid player, but getting the first-round draft capital means a lot. He also has fresh legs from sitting behind Bijan at Texas. The ACL injury doesn't overly concern me, and if he does go in the first round, assume that the team did their due diligence and the injury isn't too much of a concern. People may argue for this next player over Brooks, just like at quarterback, though, running backs are scarce. And I'll explain my reasoning further in just a second. So at 10, I'm going Brock Bowers. He went at pick 10 to the New York Jets. Feels like every mock I see nowadays is Bowers going to the Jets. And Bowers is an amazing prospect, and getting Rodgers as his QB is great for year 1. A lot of people, though, think it's enough to continue what Sam Laporta started and break the traditional wisdom that rookie tight ends don't produce. I'm a little more concerned. Certainly it's in the realm of possibilities that Brock is a fantasy asset year 1, but it's also possible he isn't the tight end 1 like Laporta. Don't let that recency bias creep in, okay? Temper the expectations a little bit. And in Dynasty, we have to think about more than just year 1. I don't know how many years Rodgers has left, but I don't think it's many. And if Bowers does hit as a rookie, he'll maintain value even when Rodgers leaves. But if he doesn't smash year 1, he will lose trade value like almost every other rookie tight end that we've seen throughout the existence of Dynasty Fantasy Football. This is just to explain the mindset that you need to have if you draft Bowers. You are drafting him for his career. If he doesn't perform early like Laporta, don't be the one to sell him at a discount in year 2 or 3. Hold the course. Hold the course. Hold the course. 11. Another very surprising selection. That's why I wanted to use this mock. Bo Nix at 23 to the Vikings. Now, Reuter's explanation made sense. The Vikings did something similar when they waited till the late first to draft Teddy Bridgewater. I don't love Nix, but again, not a quarterback scout, but I do trust Jettas and Kevin O'Connell. Getting drafted in the late first offers a lot less job security than the other QBs, but this landing spot is picture perfect. So you could even push him up a little bit, but there's so many great landing spots in this mock. It's hard to pin him down. 12, though, Brian Thomas going to Cincinnati at pick 18. So Brian Thomas's production profile is some cause for concern. To me, he's this year's QJ. He's a wide receiver that should get drafted mid-late first and has an extremely volatile range of outcomes. On the analytics side, his lack of great production in the first 2 years of his collegiate career is concerning. On the landing spot side, this would indicate either Higgins is getting traded or the Bengals are letting him walk after the tag this year. Either way, getting paired up with Burrow is very nice, especially with Chase to take some of the defensive focus off of Thomas. Still, the risk I see with Thomas has me put him below Bo, Bowers, and Brooks. But the return for selecting him there, especially at the end of round 1, is valid. 13. We got Blake Corum, staying with Harbaugh after getting picked at 37 overall to the Chargers. Not only would pick 37 be great capital for Corum, but you have to assume Harbaugh's going to continue using him, pretty heavily like he did in college. It would be very interesting to see. You assume at 37 overall, Harbaugh's going to use him like a workhorse. And given the lack of depth on the Chargers at running back, Corum would be a great selection at the start of round 2 in rookie drafts. 14, I have Michael Penix. He goes off the board at pick 33 after the Raiders pull a trade up with the Panthers. Landing in Vegas offers some upside if he can usurp O'Connell and Minshew while Devontez Adams is in the mix. I care less about age at quarterback as long as it comes with a little bit more polish, which I do think Penix has. But any quarterback after round 1, even when selected with the first pick of the second round, comes with a solid dose of risk. 15. Landing spot really pushed this guy up. Devontez Walker goes to the Bills at pick 60. So if the Bills don't take a receiver in round 1, whoever they take in the later rounds will be pushed up boards heavily like I'm doing with Walker here. And for good reason. The depth chart is wide open. I worry about Walker being more of a vertical threat than a consistent target, and his production profile leaves something to be desired. There were a solid number of offensive weapons selected before Walker in this mock, but the chance to grab an upstart target in the Bills' offense is just too good to pass up here. Next one. Everyone's favorite white wide receiver, Lad McConkey. Goes to the Tennessee Titans at pick 38. McConkey's numbers don't jump off the page given Georgia's low passing volume and the presence of Brock Bowers, but they still are solid numbers. Lad would likely take the slot role in the Titans offense, and slot targets are high value in fantasy, and this Titans offense under Callahan should see some more passing volume than during the Vrabel era. Apologies there. I think McConkey is safer than a lot of these other prospects that will follow, but I can't admit there might be a cap ceiling here, in Tennessee. Who knows, though. 17. Cap ceiling is not a problem. At pick 46, the Colts take the athletic freak, Johnny Wilson. If Wilson moves to tight end, I'd love the opportunity as an outlet for Richardson in his offense. At wide receiver, there's a little bit more uncertainty for me for how he might be used. Regardless, he's one of the highest upside picks in the second round, just due to his frame. If he can develop into something, it would be pretty crazy. Just the numbers he can put up. 18, Adonai Mitchell. Some more support for Jalen Hurts comes at pick 53. Now, I'm a fan of Mitchell, despite his so-so production. Context will tell you he had a solid freshman year at Georgia with Brock and Ladd both on the team. Then he got injured as a sophomore. And this last season at Texas, he had 24% of the team's receiving yards with Worthy and Jatavion Sanders on the squad. So I understand he does, with the Eagles, come into another little bit of a crowded situation, but I think Mitchell is talented, so bet on the talent. Next, we got Troy Franklin. So Franklin is a difficult prospect to wrap my head around. I loved his production, but his weight is a slight concern to me. Admittedly, less so with the direction of the NFL is headed, but in Washington, there is some legit target competition. I still think Dotson is a great player, but Franklin is worth the pick at the end of round 2, especially, maybe the Commanders move on from Terry, who knows. Next at 20, I'm taking Xavier Legette. He goes to the Saints at pick 45. With Legette, though, I'm not a big fan of fifth-year prospects, and that's what Legette is. The Saints do have some openings on the depth chart, but simply put, I can't trust a wide receiver that didn't do anything of note until his 5th year. Pick 21, Roman Wilson, goes to the New England Patriots at pick 68. Even though his numbers look paltry, Wilson did do a decent amount given the run-heavy offense at Michigan. Similar thing with McConkey. He's not a receiver I'd bank on, but the opportunity is there on the Patriots depth chart, and he can start to build a connection with Drake Maye, who went to the Patriots early in this draft from day 1. 22, I'm taking Jatavion Sanders. We just mentioned Sanders when discussing Mitchell, but let's dive deeper. In this mock, he lands with Miami at pick 55. He's really the only other tight end that's gotten a decent buzz by the community in the lead up to this draft, and landing with, the Dolphins, he's going to get utilized in some way. I do have, a building fear with just the number of mouths we expect to get fed in this offense, but McDaniel is smart. I assume, it might be a little shakier, a little up and down with Sanders, but for the most part, a lot of, unless he's a top 3 tight end, which probably isn't there, give me that boomer bust at tight end, kind of. I mean, they're inconsistent to begin with. You might as well take a higher range of upside at tight end if you're already having inconsistency issues with the position group as a whole. 23, Trey Benson lands with the Giants at pick 70. With Devin Singletary as the only other threat in this backfield, you could certainly take Benson higher. I'm just not a massive supporter. Given his injury, it's not the lack of early production that scares me, but rather his lack of receiving work. It's just, running backs that don't put up decent receiving numbers, they're just a dice roll I'm not super in favor of. Especially when, you're the later you go. Luke McCaffrey goes to the Bears at pick 75. Now, just having the name McCaffrey makes Luke intriguing. Being paired up with the top QB of this class is also very intriguing. Potentially being Keenan's successor in this offense is intriguing. McCaffrey's entire college career is also intriguing. He was a quarterback until 2022, and last year as a receiver, he made up 40% of Rice's receiving yards, but he's also a fifth year who played at Rice. He's certainly a high upside pick if it works out, which this late in your rookie draft is what you should be generally targeting. 25, Malachi Corley ends up with the Steelers at pick 84. We all know the Steelers are going to pick a receiver on day 2. The question is who and at what pick. Now, as a Steeler fan, I will temper the flames a little bit with the admission that not every receiver that we draft is a hit. There have been James Washingtons, Sammy Coates, and Marcus Wheatons to go along with the Jujus, Deontez, and Pickens. I do think Corley would be the former, not the latter. Over 38% of his targets last season came behind the line of scrimmage, and everyone wants to think he's the next Deebo Samuel. However, despite playing at Western Kentucky, he didn't dominate the offense like you'd want. There's a chance he's the next day 2 receiver for the Steelers. That'll be a massive hit, but you'll likely have to draft whoever the Steelers pick higher than their value would suggest that you should. So just keep that in mind. The community will bump up whoever the Steelers take. 26, Ricky Pearsall. Cardinals, pick 71. Now, with the Cardinals, they landed a stud like Rome in the first. Pearsall is still interesting, though, with Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch being the only receivers of note on the Cardinals. At Florida, he notched 33% of the team's receiving share. However, he is yet another fifth-year receiver that we're seeing in this class. 27, Jalen Wright. Goes to the Ravens at pick 62. Now, getting me to draft a Ravens running back was already difficult. Now they have Derrick Henry. Maybe this is a Tajay Spears situation where you can get some value in year 2, but Spears is also now in a timeshare with Tony Pollard this season. So unless you traded him after Henry was gone before they signed Pollard, was selecting him really that much of a win? On top of that, the Ravens running backs are always seemingly stuck in a committee backfield. For the Ravens, this pick makes some sense because Wright would be an explosive home run hitting back to pair with Henry's bruising style of running, but in fantasy, this just feels like a difficult pick to make since you'll never know when that home run will actually come. In best ball, though, I don't mind some decent exposure. Braylon Allen goes to the Arizona Cardinals at pick 104. Braylon Allen is the running back I like the most in the build-up to this draft. So it's disappointing to find out that I'm a fraud. On a serious note, though, pick 100 is the kind of the drop-off point for fantasy relevance. It's not a hard cutoff by any means, but after pick 100, the number of fantasy-relevant players declines very significantly. However, Allen's 40 time was the big question. On tape, he runs decently quick for a big back, but scouts, wanted to see how fast he actually is, and he didn't run at the Combine or Wisconsin's Pro Day. So that's a little concerning. On the positive side, his production was great on the ground. His receiving work could have been better, but it did improve each year. And at the Cardinals, he profiles as a similar back to Connor, suggesting that he would be the team's successor when Connor's contract expires after this season. 29, Will Shipley goes to Kansas City at pick 95. Now, Shipley has lost a lot of the hype that he carried with him after his sophomore season. He lacks the size of someone like Braylon Allen, and he does not have the explosiveness of some other players in this draft. There have been highlights, though, and landing in Kansas City offers both opportunity and concern. There is a chance he could overtake Pacheco if he shines, since Reed is known to ride the hot hand. However, more likely, Shipley will just kind of be a handcuffed, buoyed by the upside of the Chiefs' offense. So I'm not getting super excited, even though it is a good landing spot. Keon Coleman lands with Baltimore, pick 93. Now, Keon was another player I liked a lot earlier in the offseason, but he hasn't looked super shiny after running a 6'4", 40. And, landing in Baltimore isn't great either, with Flowers and Andrews taking up much of Lamar's targets. 31, Jermaine Burton lands at Carolina, pick 101. In 2021, Burton slightly edged Ladd McConkey in receiving yards at Georgia. Then he transfers to Alabama, where he's led the team in receiving yards the past 2 seasons. Now, from a fantasy perspective, my main concern with Burton is that he profiles as a field-stretching deep threat. which can mean less consistent target share. And admittedly, Bryce Young is still a question mark, but again, targeting an open depth chart, especially if you believe that Burton is talented, which is a fair belief, not a bad pick, especially this late. Next, we got Marshawn Lloyd. Lands with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at pick 92. Tampa does need some running back support behind Rachaad White, and Lloyd isn't really a threat to White's real moneymaker, which is his receiving work. However, Lloyd does have a great speed-size ratio. He ran a 4.46 at the 40 at 220 pounds, and he could prove to be a very solid second punch in Tampa. That said, he is an old prospect that did not have great production in college. 33, got Spencer Rattler, landing with the Giants at pick 107. I said it earlier with Penix, any quarterback after the first is a dart throw, and I'm personally not that big of a Rattler fan, but New York media hype always kind of does help fantasy value, admittedly. Jalen Polk, wide receiver, Atlanta, pick 109. Polk accounted for 23% of Washington's receiving yards this season. While there is potential to beat out Mooney and Moore as Atlanta's second wide receiver with Kirk in town, I worry about the number of mouths to feed in this offense. Are we realistically going to feed Pitts, London, and Bijan and then add in Polk? We're getting to a lot here. So just decent landing spot, not great. It does concern me a little bit. And I don't think Polk is a stud player. Then 35, got Brendan Rice. Jerry Rice's son lands with the Jacksonville Jaguars at pick 116. He accounted for 21% of Caleb's yards at USC this past year. Sadly, though, unlike Marvin Harrison Jr., this son of an NFL great doesn't look like he will be a stud. However, with Gabe Davis and Zay Jones as his main competition for the number 2 spot, there is still a chance to develop into something more than we see right now. For trade purposes, the last name Rice might be enough to get you some value back if you don't love what you see during his rookie year as well. Then final pick here, pick 36, Blake Watson lands with the Colts at pick 117. He was solid as a receiving back, but at Indy, you have to assume he's going to be cemented behind Taylor for the next 2 years. So, if he lands somewhere else, though, the receiving production is there for Watson. Expect an updated rankings after the draft when we actually do get the realistic, set-in-stone landing spots. If you enjoyed this video, please show some support. It tells me to do some more of them. Thank you and have a good one.